You're listening to the Show We Go Baseball podcast.
A lot of the headlines recently have been more about a power-hitting right-handed bat. Jorge Soler's come up a little bit, but the last big meltdown Red Sox Twitter had was over Teoscar Hernandez. That doesn't really concern me, if I'm being totally honest. I think that they'll be able to find hitting. The Red Sox have always been able to develop hitting from within. What they haven't been able to do is develop pitching. And I'm looking at the rotation right now, and I remember back in September, Alex Cora said that Chris Sale was going to be the opening day starter. And you look at the rotation, and it's Brayan Bello, it's Nick Pivetta, it's Lucas Giolito. None of those guys scream opening day starter. None of those guys scream number one starter at this point. If you were a betting man, I don't know if you are. We're not sponsored by DraftKings or anything like that, so I don't have to advertise that.
Well, I am,
but
to a problem point.
So, who would you bet on being the opening day starter for the Red Sox? Do you think they're here right now, or do you think it's coming from somewhere else, either trade or free agency? What are your expectations?
Bello, and that was a prediction I wrote with the caveat that I think that as we saw last year with Kluber starting, not because he was the number one in the rotation, but that's just because how they lined up. I think that kind of the glimmer of starting an opening day is off for some of these teams where they don't want to rush Chris Sale a year ago to pitch one day earlier because of health reasons. I think something that's going to come into play this year, and this is just a guess of mine, is that Brayan Bello is probably going to be their number one, and they are playing 2 exhibition games in the Dominican Republic in March. And I would guess that he is going to want to pitch in one of those games as one of his spring training outings as a native. If that lines up with March 28th, then, so be it. If it doesn't, if it lines up with March 30th, there's so many off days now, and there's so much they can do to skip guys and throw in an opener one day that I don't think it matters. I think, probably the question is who's their number one. He probably is. And I wrote that already because I don't see you getting that guy on the trade market. I don't think the Cease thing is legit from everything we've heard from their side. I don't think that they are going to be in on a rental guy like Bieber or Burns. Burns has already said he doesn't want to sign an extension. If you're the Red Sox in this position, you can't do a rental starter considering what it's going to cost. And as we've said a billion times, as Alex Spear is now writing as well, everybody in the industry thinks they have no shot at Montgomery or Snell. So based on process of elimination, I think Bello, and then I think they get a guy in the number 2 mold. My projected roster, I had Luzardo, and we've heard, or Sean has heard in the last few days, that Miami's had cold feet about moving him, which is, something to monitor. Obviously, they have some other guys there, Cabrera, some of these other pieces. I still think they go and get a pretty good, controllable starter, and they empty some of the farm for it, mostly because they have to. And they just at some point have to bite the bullet, and maybe it's after Montgomery and Snell are off the market, and that market picks up a little bit. So I would guess a number 2 comes in, and they add a veteran number 5. I don't know who that's going to be. Alex Spear, again, has said that Paxton's unlikely. Clevenger is out there. Lorenzen is out there. I think Marcus Stroman, from an off-the-field perspective in Boston with the issues he's had, he's gone at it with Alex Cora before. Not that Eckersley's here anymore. He's gone at it with him. I think that would be a weird fit. Obviously, he's had issues with the Red Sox before. He's had issues with the Yankees. He's talking to them. I just think Boston would be a weird fit for him. So I don't really count on that one, and not just because he went to Duke. That's not a main reason why I'm downplaying it. Though it is a safety school. The options to me are limited. But I do think somebody in that Luzardo mold, or Seattle makes one of their 4 guys. I don't think Kirby or Gilbert, one of those maybe lesser guys who are still really good, available. My prediction would be, Bello, insert your trade guy, Crawford, Giolito, and a veteran, and push Houck and Whitlock to the bullpen.
So you don't think Pivetta then?
I think Pivetta is the rare case where And this is so shocking because of the way he handled both behind the scenes and publicly when I asked him the question last year about being moved to the bullpen. He's the rare guy who, despite being as pissed as he was so unbelievably good and wasn't shaken by that whole thing, that if you have a guy on the roster who can do that, we've seen it screw up, Whitlock and Houck at times, and we saw Daniel Bard's the classic example. And like we've seen that screw up guys over time. Pivetta, if he's willing to, hey, next week you're starting, next week you're the closer. If he's willing to do that again for an entire year, like, why not just have him do that? Like there's no downside to it. I could see him being a little more resistant to it this year because he's a free agent. I would ask him, but he has me blocked on Twitter, so I can't DM him. But I could see, based on the free agency thing, that being a little bit of an issue. But considering how good he was doing all of it last year, I see that type of role where, you need a spot start, he comes back into the rotation. Kenley's down, he closes. Like, that was extremely valuable. It kept them afloat last year, along with Chris Murphy before he really faded. So I wouldn't be surprised if they did, the same type of thing. So, you want to pencil in 5 for opening day. We all know it takes 8, 9, or 10. So that's why, I have him probably as number 6 in my made up projected rotation right now.
Now, as far as that number 2 goes, do you think they'd be able to acquire that without trading one of the big 3? Or do you think they're going to have to bite the bullet and move one of Mayer, Anthony, or Kyle Teal?
Yeah, someone told me that's been their white whale, is those 3 guys are on one side of the line and everybody else is on the other side. At the same time, the prices are high even without that. I mean, we've never been able to confirm this, but the rumor was that the ask from Cleveland for Savali was Rafaela at the deadline. And I don't think Red Sox fans would have wanted to do that at all. The Red Sox front office didn't want to do that at all. Like, Savali's not that good to give up, Rafaela and probably more. I think their dream scenario would be, and I always say trade proposals that I see a lot of the time are like, you putting together all the guys on your fantasy bench and putting them in your starting lineup to make them seem better than they are for a trade. Red Sox fans are like, well, York doesn't have a spot, so him. Dahlbeck, obviously, him. They DFA'd Yovera. We could throw him, like that type of stuff.
So we give you 3 interchangeable parts, and you give us your best player.
Exactly. That's
it's
how
perfect.
It works. I think that the Red Sox, they can work from a place of York. I think Abreu, is a pretty good trade chip already. He's in the majors. You have enough to cover. I think he has more value than Duran, I would guess. Rafaela as upside. So let's say Abreu, York, and maybe Houck has value. Something like that where you're talking about close to major league pieces. I think that's the way to avoid it. I think, and Sean McAdam and I have talked a lot about this on our pod. To me, if I were to rank the untouchable rankings, number 1 is Teal, number 2 is Anthony, and number 3 is Meyer. I think if anyone gets moved from that group, it is Meyer, just because you have so much in the way of middle infield depth. With Anthony, I think the upside's there, and people are obviously in love with him now. They have a lot in terms of outfield depth, and with that franchise catcher, those guys don't grow on trees. So to me, you just don't touch him. But in a perfect world, they'd be able to do it with, name your young outfielder from that group of 3, name your young infielder from that group of, York, maybe one of the first round picks from the last couple of years. Grissom might have interest from teams, that can't be ruled out, even though they view him that way as their second baseman of the future. So, they have guys, kind of pick from those pods. They'll probably need to include a pitcher. If a team wants to take Houck, good. I would keep, I would even keep Crawford almost untouchable because, I know Bayo and Casas are obvious, but Crawford, I think, is pretty underrated, probably because he only went 4 2/3 every time. But when he was out there, he was pretty good. And I think teams would be calling on him, but you're creating more of the problem you have if you trade him. So, like I said, perfect world, Abreu, York, pick 1 or 2 more pieces and do it. Will that be enough on this market? Probably not.